Good afternoon, everyone. Allison Schaberg here, Consolidated Planning Group. We are happy to be back with you again today. We're happy to be presenting on Texas Workforce Solutions Vocational Rehab Services. So many of our families, they want to know about work opportunities for their loved one with a disability, how to get started. And the cool thing is there are a lot of state and federally funded programs out there for individuals with disabilities to help get them to work. So today we are here with Rebecca Quintero, TWC VR Division, and so she's going to be talking about their programs today and how you can get involved. And we know that, you know, when people attend our webinars, we've got some people that may already be enrolled in some of these programs, and maybe they're having a hard time connecting with their counselor. Maybe they're just getting started. They heard a little bit about it. Maybe their child just became old enough to get started in these programs. So we're going to take a deep dive into that. Today we are also here, we have Justin Moen here with Blue Sprig, and he's going to take just a minute and talk to us a little bit about Blue Sprig in just a second. I just want to go over a couple housekeeping items. The first things first, we are in webinar mode today, which means that we cannot see you or hear you, but we know you're here and we're glad that you're here with us today. We invite you to put your questions in the chat box as we're going through. We'll answer just as many questions as we can during the time that we have together. We also received some emails of questions, so we have those ready as well, so we'll be going through that. Consolidated Planning Group, for those of you that are attending for the first time, we are a holistic special needs financial planning firm. We're nationally certified as Social Security advisors and members of the Special Needs Planning Academy. We help families just like yours plan for a loved one with a disability. We answer questions like, who's going to care for my child when I'm gone? How much money do I need to fund a special needs trust? And what programs might my loved one be eligible? Sometimes we take a deeper dive in SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, and other such programs. We help people put protection plans in place, lifetime care plans, as well as ABLE accounts, and we do a lot of advocacy by way of webinars. Our Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel, we have over 500 webinars on planning for special needs. So you'll want to check that out. You can subscribe to that for free. So Justin, tell us a little bit more about Blue Sprig.
Yeah, Blue Sprig is an ABA company for autism. We work on kids' behavior and motor skills. We currently also looking for people who are RBTs or BCBAs wise for employment, work with a child. RBT does is register, be a technician. They work with kids on the autism spectrum one-on-one, and where they're improving the behaviors and motor skills and all the different things, trainings wise, do the training wise there. If it's 40-hour plus trainings, and it's a great job. I've been there for 5 years. I work there as a data entry clerk, and it's been great wise. So I started as RBT and worked my way over to this position I'm in wise now. So it's creative wise, and I'm on the autism spectrum and a self-advocate, also a public speaker. So if any more thoughts or questions, concerns, you can feel free to contact me or as well, or questions, answers, as well,
Justin,
information.
we're happy that you're here with us today, and it's encouraging. You mentioned, and I wasn't going to say anything, but you mentioned that you're on the spectrum yourself, and it just goes to show that these programs work. There are a lot of programs, a lot of training on closing the gaps on impediments to employment, and your loved one too can be gainfully employed. So, and you are a testament of that, Justin. So we are appreciative of your hard work. We're appreciative of the work that Blue Sprig does, and thank you for being here with us today and telling us a little bit more about that. We put that contact information for Blue Sprig in the chat box, and Justin, if you want to copy and paste that again to everyone, they'll have that as well. So thanks so much.
No problem.
And so Rebecca, we're going to turn everything over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role, what you do, and we're going to just dive right into the content today.
All right, thank you, Allison, and thank you, Justin, for sharing your information. So yes, my name is Rebecca Quintero. I am a senior transition specialist with our Texas Workforce Commission organization. I know with Texas Workforce, it can be confusing. So I'll hopefully explain that to you, but I do welcome the questions. There on the slide, you'll see my information, but it's also been dropped in the chat, so feel free to grab it from there as well. So you can go to the next slide. And just so you know, I've been with vocational rehabilitation for 23 years in various roles. And so as you heard me just say, I serve as a senior transition specialist with our region. If you'll go back one more slide, Allison. I'm going to start here. So just there's a lot going on this very basic slide here, but on the upper left-hand corner, you will see Texas Workforce Commission logo. So I want for you to think of that as our state agency. There's an umbrella on that slide too. Think of them as the overarching agency. They're the ones that are really the big boss of workforce development. They're the ones that set the policies, they distribute the funds for the various programs. So think of them as the big boss. And there on the lower right-hand corner, you'll see Texas Workforce Solutions. So everybody's like, well, wait, who's TWC, who's Workforce Solutions? So Workforce Solutions are really our local offices within your communities. They're like the boots on the ground, if you will. They're the ones that provide direct services. So that's how I want you to differentiate the two. And of course, I'm here representing Vocational Rehabilitation Services, or the division, because we have specific services that fall under Texas Workforce Commission, and we can be found in the local offices. So you can go to the next slide. So here's just a quick image of the state of Texas. We are broken into 6 different regions across the state of Texas. My role that I serve, I support the region for South Texas, which is Region 6. Should you need a contact for any of the other regions, I can also put that at the end of my presentation. But across the state of Texas, there are 28 local workforce boards. Again, we get more confusing, right? But each of these workforce development boards work within the communities, and they're the ones that set the expectation for what their community needs. And again, going back to the Workforce Solutions Office, which we have 180 local offices across the state of Texas, they're the ones that provide that direct delivery. So I want you to think of the local workforce boards kind of like an independent school district, where each of those districts set those expectations for their areas.
I just want to mention that while we're talking about Texas today, vocational rehab is a national program that is offered all throughout the United States. They all have different offices. There are services and help for people with disabilities to go to work in all 50 states. So you do want to check out your programs in your state, but they have similar programs. They may call something a little bit different. They may have different, different regions or the way they set it up, but there are programs throughout the United States. So I just want to mention that because we have a lot of people that attend our webinars all throughout the US.
Yeah, no, thanks for chiming in and sharing that. Okay, next slide. So I'm really here to share some information about how we can work with our transition age students. And these are students that are in high school and preparing for their transition out of high school. So we work off of a definition of a student with a disability to be able to consider that student, that transition student in receiving our services. So our agency has really a 3-point criteria. They have to be between the ages of 14 to 22. They have to be currently enrolled in an educational program, and it can be any kind of recognized program. So it could even be homeschooling, private school, any kind of school that they're enrolled in, both secondary in high school or even post-secondary as soon as they recently graduated high school, for example. And they have to be receiving services through our special education program, or even receiving support through Section 504. So next slide. So here's an image. I want you to visualize that there's a couple of pathways that you can take when you connect with vocational rehabilitation. The image here is two paths. One veers off to the left, one veers off to the right. And the 2 points here is if you veer off to the left, for example, we can serve you under what we call a potentially eligible pathway. The other pathway is what we call VR eligible pathway. I know they both have the word eligibility in there, but just to give you a sense, potentially eligible pathway allows for us to connect with students more readily while they're in school and get them on a path to receiving services fairly quickly, versus our VR eligible pathway just expands the available services that we have. And there is a process, and I'll be going over both of those here. But for the VR eligible pathway, you do have to apply for services. You have to be determined eligible. Versus the potentially eligible, we just need to verify that you meet that definition of a student with a disability and that you can provide proof of disability or verification, if you will. And it could be by way of a school record, for example, or even medical records. So let's dive into what these two areas provide. So the options for services, whether you take the potentially eligible pathway or the VR eligible pathway, we can serve a student with what's called pre-employment transition services. And this is really just connecting with your counselor at the campuses that your son or daughter attend. And we just get basic information about who they are, what their needs are, what their disability is. We get that verification, and we can provide these pre-employment transition services, also known as pre-ETs. But again, if they meet that student with a definition, we can still provide pre-ET services if they apply for what we call, which is the next step there, full array of services, which is your VR eligible phase. And this, again, you have to talk to a counselor. They will set up an appointment to conduct what we call a diagnostic interview. We collect a lot of information to make sure that we determine you eligible into our program, because we are not an entitlement program. We are an eligibility program. And we'll go over the criteria of how you're determined eligible for that as well. But on both pathways of these options, you can receive pre-ETs on either of those two pathways that I just mentioned.
I know you're going to take a deeper dive into this, but we've had some families that feel a little overwhelmed with all of the information that is needed for VR. And it is, I've gone through this with my family members, and it is a lot of information, but it's information you have, like any approval for SSI or SSDI, diagnostic history. There's quite a few things that they're going to need for VR. But I've also been told that, like, if they're going through the door of like pre-ETs and some of the workforce solutions stuff, like the summer earn and learn, it's not quite as much information that is needed as VR. But once it's done and submitted, it's not, you don't have to continuously resubmit it, and it's not any more than what you have to submit for a Medicaid application. So it's about the same. So I just like people to have a heads up. It's not a sit down and do it in 5 minutes kind of activity.
Yeah, and you mentioned Summer Earn and Learn, which is one program that we can connect with, but it does depend the needs, the support needs, if you will, of the student that would determine which route they go in, whether it's straight potentially eligible, or if they needed additional services, then we would go into this pathway that you've just put up on the screen. So this one is the more, I guess, well-known one, because potentially eligible is a fairly new phase that we got supported through our Workforce and Opportunity Innovation Act. But this particular pathway, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff on this one. But starting from the very left of that screen where it says initial contact, that's where we start. That's literally just saying, who are you? Where do you live? What's your address? What's your email? What's your reported disability? That initial contact is just you saying, hey, I want a little bit more information about vocational rehabilitation. Can I get an appointment? I am a person with a disability. So then we schedule you within 30 days. You'll see the timeline at the very bottom. We'll schedule you for an application within 30 days. And that's giving the counselor an opportunity to get to know you, your perspective of your reported disability, what some of your struggles might be with that disability, what your strengths are that you can offer to an employer, because everything that we do is geared towards eventually getting you employment. After that application, we have by federal law 60 days to determine your eligibility based on medical reports that we might request. We might send you out for some kind of assessments. It could be, for example, when we think of a student, it could be a vocational assessment, it could be a psychological assessment, a psychiatric assessment. It all depends on what you bring to the table in terms of what you might already have, because we're not going to send students out for evaluations if they're not necessary, because you might already have that information. So we use whatever you have or what we might need to secure to determine your eligibility. And then you work with that counselor over a period of 90 days to come up with a comprehensive idea of what services you need. And once you have that in mind, you all will come up with an individualized plan for employment, what we call an IPE, an individualized plan for employment. And that's where we do our service delivery there. There's a little red box there. That's where we begin to actively provide the services that you need to reach an employment outcome, which is that last piece there. And although you see it linear here, we all know that life happens to all of us, and sometimes you have to take little turns left and right. But this is, if it was a perfect, this is what it's going to look like from start to finish, just to give you an idea. So we'll go to the next slide. And here I really just already spoke about the high points here. So your initial contact is just, the student making contact with their counselor. It could be at the school. It could also be by phone, where the parent makes the contact with us. So the initial contact is just saying, hey, we're interested, we were referred, this is who referred us. And then again, we schedule you for the application. And there's a bullet point there to give you more of a sense of what we collect during that meeting. We want to know a lot more about the disability, any kind of limitations that are involved. Have you ever worked before if you're a young student? Do you want to work? Is there, any kind of volunteer work that you've done? We want to know about your education journey, any kind of personal and legal issues that might affect employment, because we need to be aware of that. Sometimes I'll give you an example with that second bullet. We do want to know what the student's perspective is of their disability, because sometimes I used to be a transition counselor, and sometimes when I would meet with the young student, I'd say, so what's your understanding of why you're connected with special education? And they weren't able to really explain that to me. They were confused and say, oh, I don't have any problems. And it was just the awareness of how they could help advocate for themselves, right? So, we want to make sure that the students have an understanding of their own disability, because once they get to employment, they're going to need to self-advocate. So we just want to get a sense for what they know and to better educate. Counselor is going to make some observations. And of course, if there's any medical records or any assessments that we need to send you for, we will send you out for those. And then, of course, we want to know if you're a recipient of Social Security income or even a disability, SSDI or SSI. Because if you do have that benefit, there's pockets of policy that allow for us to determine your eligibility immediately once you provide that proof of SSI or SSDI for the student. But there are also allowances that if we have questions about the severity of a disability, that we would take a different route with the case. Okay, next slide. And then here is just the eligibility determination criteria. We have to establish that you do have a physical, mental, or even visual disability. We want to then determine what impediment that disability constitutes. What kind of struggles do you encounter as a result of that reported disability? And then we also want to make sure that we are considering services that student needs to be able to prepare for, secure, retain, or even perhaps later on down the line, advance or even regain employment, that are consistent with all of the wonderful strengths that they come with, their priorities, what are their interests, their abilities. And of course, everything that we do in vocational rehabilitation is focused on informed choice. All that means is that if we have 4 providers in an area, you can choose a provider that's closest to where you live. Another example is you prefer to work with a female versus a male if that's available. That's called informed choice. And then the last piece of our eligibility is that we can determine or presume that you are capable of employment. And then we would determine you eligible if you're applying for all services. All right, so now we're going into, let me see. We're going into potentially eligible. Is that my next slide? Okay, yes. Okay, so if you're determined eligible, this slide is just letting you know if you are determined eligible, if you recall the image that we saw of the VR process, you will then work with your counselor to create an individualized plan for employment. And it's just going to list one vocational goal. What is that goal that we're working towards? It will have a list of services that we've agreed to. This is led by your counselor, but this is definitely a mutual conversation and consideration of services that are necessary to help you reach that goal. It's also going to list the providers that were chosen based on your informed choice. And of course, the time period that we're working towards to make sure that we can support you through your employment journey, eventual employment journey. If you're determined ineligible, your case would be closed. We would explain the reasons for closure and provide you with some written documentation of that closure. Next slide.
I just want to talk about the student or the person's willingness to be in the program, because what we've seen is that certainly there's a lot of parents that would love their kids to be in this program, but their kid has exactly zero interest and they're not responsive. So I do want you to talk about that, because I do know that that has been an issue for some people.
Yes, and I pull from my experience as a transition counselor. I do still support caseloads here and there, but you are absolutely right. Parents automatically see the value and the benefit of their son or daughter applying for our services, whether it's the potentially eligible pathway or applying for a full array of services. They see the benefit because they know their son or daughter's personality well. They know their strengths. They know some of their weaknesses. And when you tap into our services earlier, the soonest, the better. The sooner, the better, because then you get, if you came to us as a freshman, you're going to get years of pre-ETS services and experience and paid work experience and opportunity to participate in group skills trainings. And I'll hopefully come back around to that. But Allison's right. If we have a student that needs the service but doesn't want it, and it's the parent, it's going to be a very difficult partnership because we are not going to chase the student, so to speak. We need for them to be a partner. We need for them to be able to take our phone calls, engage in the services, provide feedback, allowing us to get to know them so that we can make sure that we're guiding them to the best possible employment outcome.
I mean, the other thing too is, yeah, they also can work part-time and still get their SSI benefits too. And that's the other thing that's maybe out
Yes.
there as well.
And thank you, Justin. So yeah, even with Social Security, I know Allison even mentioned it earlier, but there's going to be a lot of questions about, whether my son or daughter's Social Security benefits could be impacted. When you come to us, for example, as you just heard me say, if you show us proof of SSI or SSDI for the student, we can determine them eligible right away, unless I said we have questions about their ability to become employed. And we're really talking more of significant disabilities. And that doesn't mean we close the case. That just means we take a different route to make sure that we can verify that one way or the other. And that's called a trial work plan. So we give them opportunities to engage in real work experience in different settings over a period of time, and we get feedback from somebody that gets chosen as the employment service provider, and they will tell us that yes or no, based on all these experiences, that the student in fact can work, they've proven it, or if they're too significant, they will let us know that it doesn't seem that the individual could work independently in a competitive integrated employment outcome. And then, of course, VR would not be the program for that individual, but we would provide you with resources to get you on the right path to make sure that your son or daughter still gets served with other services.
And some of that comes if in the beginning there is any kind of testing on the work evaluation on, whether or not, basically that is just to determine what are the impediments to employment and what training and resources are needed to close the gaps on that. But Justin, you make a great point, and I just want to mention, because I think a lot of families, everybody knows it's no small feat to get SSI approved, especially in Texas. It's been taking over a year. It's been multiple denials. It's not fun. And so I think once that is approved, the first fear that somebody has is, oh my gosh, if I go to work, then I'm going to lose the SSI. We do an entire webinar on working and SSI and how working impacts public benefits and different programs that you can apply for. The Social Security Administration, they have the Social Security Red Book. You can download this online for free. And it talks about the 5 phases of work, because just because you go to work one day doesn't mean they're going to cut a person off right away and you're just done. It doesn't work like that. There's 5 phases of work. The Social Security Administration does understand that people that have disabilities want to try their hand at working. They truly are disabled, but they want to try and see what they can do. And so they have that 5-phase program. And then the other thing that I want to mention, and I don't want to steal your thunder, Rebecca, but
No.
VR, they have subject matter experts on benefit counseling, free benefit counseling. And I have to say, I've talked to several of them over the years, and they're pretty fantastic. So that is through the Workforce Commission as well as the Social Security Administration. If you go on their website and say free benefit counseling, it'll pop up. WIPA is going to pop up. So if you're thinking about going to work, just know you don't have to pay somebody for benefit counseling. You can get free benefit counseling on how is it going to impact SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, any other programs that you're worried about losing. Do that, go through that counseling. So thank you, Justin. That was a great point.
Yeah. Also report your wages if you are working. Make sure you send, by the app or mail them or whatever. As long as you do that, they could adjust, and that you get paid more if you get SSI and you work part-time.
That is important too. I've seen families get in trouble where they weren't reporting the wages. It always catches up, and then you get this terrible letter in the mail from the Social Security Administration of how much money you owe them. So you're supposed to report on the 1st. It's late on the 5th. You are supposed to report every month. So good point. All right, we're going to give it back to you, Rebecca.
Mhm.
And just to maybe just briefly expand on what Allison mentioned. So whenever you do come to us and you apply for the full array of services, not through potentially eligible, but for the full array, we are required to provide that benefits counseling. So that has to go on the plan. So that's a great benefit and resource to you all, that we make sure that you get that counseling if you report SSI or SSDI. I feel like I've already touched on this potentially eligible pathway already. As I mentioned, it's fairly a new phase that was approved by our Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. It's a quicker way to serve our students while they're in school. And by no means is it meant to circumvent the actual process, the VR process, which is a lengthier one, as you heard me say. But it is intended to be able to focus on students receiving pre-ETS services.
So the bottom line is most schools in Texas have a VR counselor assigned to that school, but we're in the summer now, school's not in session. And the other bottom line is if your kids are homeschooled or they go to private school, or what have you, or it's summertime and you don't have access to the school folks, you do not have to go through that school system. You can go right online. You could do it right now. You don't have to wait till fall to get going with this.
Yeah, and on my last slide, you'll have an opportunity to even do what we call Start My VR, and I'll go over that also. It's a self-referral opportunity. So again, here with the potentially eligible pathway, to receive your pre-ETS services, you just again have to meet that definition of a student with a disability that we reviewed at the beginning of the presentation. And the other things that we consider when you come to us wanting to be a potentially eligible customer is you will always have informed choice. We will handle your case with the utmost confidential approach. And of course, you will have access to the client assistance program. And that's just for some reason, if you and your counselor aren't in agreement with services that are being discussed, you can bring in what we call a CAPS representative to help figure out what services are being requested, and we come to an agreement and a conclusion. And it's no harm, no foul. It's your right to bring these individuals in. We advocate for you as well as they do. Potentially eligible students are not subject to what we call basic living requirements. And that just means that when you apply for the full array of services, because we receive state and federal funds, we are required to have proof of your income and expenses for your family. And so if you're over what what the state deems a basic living requirement, if you're over a certain amount, you'll be required to pay in towards your services. You don't pay us, you pay towards the services. But I can tell you most of the customers that we serve fall under that basic living requirement. But this is just saying if you go the potentially eligible route, we don't even consider that. It's only for when you apply for services. Um,
And the amount that a person has to pay, I mean, it's on a sliding scale, and they have this whole big, no offense, complicated calculation. So we work with a lot of people that would automatically think, oh, we're not going to qualify for any of that.
yeah,
And
right.
it's heavily discounted to where, like, if you could go get some of these services on your own and pay for them 100% out of pocket, but what you would end up having to pay, even if you were in that situation of where you made more money basically than the guideline, it's still considerably less than you going out on your own and doing it. So don't think, I always tell this to all people, including sending neurotypical kids to college, oh, we won't qualify for that. You'd be surprised the things that you might qualify for, even being in a higher income bracket, because of different things that they're offering. So don't put yourself in a box is the main thing that I'm telling you if you're in that upper category, because most of our families, even if they had to pay a small piece towards this, it was a fraction of the cost of what it would have been 100% out of pocket.
Yeah, and part of it too is, if you're a student that maybe takes medication and parents pay for that medication on a monthly basis, we consider that kind of expense as it relates to our customer, the one that's applying for services. So yeah. And this last bullet here just says a student who has not yet applied for services or been determined eligible would stay on the potentially eligible side until they are determined eligible into the full array of services. All right, next slide. So here's a 5 pre-employment transition services that we can provide. And I know this part can be very confusing as well, but I want everybody to think of these as little appetizers. And so there are 5 areas in which we can provide these appetizer services. The first one is called career exploration counseling. And it's just as the word implies, we're going to explore different careers based on that student's interest and provide some discussion, some guidance around why they want to pursue a certain industry versus another. We can pull, jobs in demand. And so this can be done directly with the vocational rehabilitation counselor, and it can be done through other type services, such as, we can hit on this particular pre-ETS service through what we call a group skills training. So, I'll give maybe an example here in a bit after I go over a few, because this one service, group skills training, I just got back from was pretty amazing. So that's one of our pre-test services. The second one is work-based learning, and that's really just giving a student an opportunity to get paid work experience in an actual work environment. As you heard Allison mention earlier, Summer Earn and Learn would be one of those services as an example. Summer Earn and Learn is a 5-week summer paid work experience. We don't job match the customer for career choice. It's more of the experience so they can learn what it is to go to work every day, to wear the right uniform every day, how to interact with others while they're on the job site. So this work-based learning is really where you see students grow in their confidence, especially when they have no work experience. But this is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for students. You don't, when it comes to work-based learning, you can also have volunteer experiences. It doesn't have to only be paid, but it does have to be in a real work setting. So I can't just come to my office and pretend to set something up. We have to take a student to an actual workplace. And another example could be when we take students here in San Antonio to the Toyota plant. That's a work-based experience because they're learning about different employment options within a larger scale employer setting.
So one of our questions today was about volunteering opportunities. So do you guys, for families that are maybe not interested in paid work right now, but they want to dip their toe in with the volunteer experiences, is that something that you guys set up those spots? You guys have relationships with employers that offer the volunteering. Is that a thing?
We can, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say no outright say no. You want to explore those conversations with your counselor because with vocational rehabilitation, we do have what we call business relations coordinators in our regions, and we can connect with them to be able to go out into the community. And I'll give you an example. If somebody did say, "Hey, I'm curious about working or volunteering at this food bank. How do I do that?" So our business relations coordinators, alongside the support of your counselor, can get that set up. But when you think of a 15-year-old, there are some labor laws that are pretty strictly tied into that age group. So they're not allowed to work with heavy machinery, kind of hazardous materials. Some of the other kind of maybe consideration limitations are sometimes they don't have their reliable transportation, so they rely on parents to get to and from work, and that's another issue sometimes for employers. But you can, volunteer at nonprofit organizations. They're usually really open to receiving the younger population, nonprofit charities, your food banks, libraries. Even when I was young, I even volunteered at a local hospital. I was a candy striper. So I would walk things to and from patients' rooms, visitors, things like that. But even community centers are good places for 15-year-olds to get connected with volunteer work. So just a few examples there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then another pre-ETS service is what we call counseling on post-secondary opportunities. So if you have a student that says, I want to go to college, I'm interested in becoming a teacher, or even if it's a certificate program, such as becoming a barber, welder, cosmetologist, those kinds of things, we talk about what that journey might look like. So for example, if they're going into academic training, they would be required to apply for financial aid and let us know if they got approved or denied, because again, that's federal money and we're receiving federal money as well. So we want to make sure what is it that they're wanting to pursue? Why is it they're wanting to pursue it? And is it something that we can support? And if it is, then we will support that journey. But this is the exploration part of it to make sure that we guide them on the right path. And maybe if I can give you a quick example of this, when I was a transition counselor, I had a young man who said, I want to be an occupational therapist. And I said, why? And he said, because they make a lot of money. And I said, okay. So I scheduled a meeting with the local community college in our area at that time. And I went with him to that meeting. And I was so interested. I was the one that was like, wow, I might apply for this program. I was the one taking notes. And after that meeting, I asked the student, did you notice anything? And he said, yes, you were the one taking all the notes. And I said, yes. And I said, what is your thought about this? And he's like, I don't want to go to school for that long. He was just kind of like, he just got disinterested in the whole career path. And I said, take this information, look it over the weekend, and then let's come back around. Long story short, he was more of a hands-on kind of guy, and he ended up going for welding. Very opposite spectrum, right? He went from occupational therapy to doing something that was definitely hands-on, more outdoorsy, and it was his thing, and he did well. So that's just an example. A fourth pre-ETS activity that we can provide is workplace readiness training. And this offers the students the opportunity to learn skills and the appropriate behaviors that are expected in a job setting. So some examples are we have job clubs that we can provide where students interact with our staff and also employers that we invite in to share a little bit about who they are, what they do, and what they're hiring for. We can do mock interviews, soft skills training. And this is, again, not only done by our immediate staff, but we can hire on what we call employment service providers. And again, based on the availability of those individuals, you have informed choice to choose who you'd like to work with. And then the last one there is self-advocacy. That one I feel goes hand in hand with all of these. And it's one of the most important ones here because if a student can't work and grow into becoming an advocate for themselves, they're going to struggle in an employment setting because they may not be comfortable asking for additional supports or accommodations or how to speak up when something's not right. And so, again, we have training and we have instruction that we can provide on that. And again, it goes hand in hand in all of these. So if I might pause, I wish I could show you some pictures, but it wasn't pre-planned. But we just came back from a weekend trip to Space Center Houston with NASA. And we took we took about 33, 35 students on this trip. It was fully paid for. We paid for the hotel, we paid for the transportation, we paid for the food. And what this did was give them an opportunity to see the various jobs at NASA. So we got a tour of all of NASA. We got to see some of the ins and outs of what they do there. They did some fun activities, which the students have to have some critical thinking skills, problem solving skills. They work together. And it was such a wonderful experience. And again, that's called a group skills training. And that group skills training hits on a lot of these pre-ETS services that I've just reviewed with you today. And so those are, again, group skills training is just another service where all of these pre-ETS activities touch on. We learned about NASA, the top 2 jobs at NASA, which one is the most obvious, but it wasn't the one that was easily guessed, is astronauts is the #1 job at NASA, followed by engineers. And that one made a lot more sense too, right? But so this is what students learn. They learn that you need a seamstress, you need a dietitian. And when you start thinking about all the possible jobs there, what this does for the student is allows them to think, hey, you know what? I think I might want a job in this area, or I might want to work at NASA. So it's just the experience of giving that student that opportunity. So now you're asking, well, how do I get to request these pre-ETS services? So when you go the potentially eligible route, it's literally just a form that the counselor will provide to you. It's a simple form that has student information, parent information, address, telephone number, and a few bullet point statements that say that you are a student with a disability, that you are in fact requesting pre-ETS services, that you've been afforded the right to client assistance program, and that we will maintain your case confidential. So it's really just a form that once we sign that, then we can get things rolling and get services started for pre-ETS services. And then again, the disability, we have to verify the disability. Once you sign the form, you give us the proof of the disability, and then services can start. We would make those arrangements for you.
We have a lot of people in the chat box asking for their contacts in their area, and I have a VR map with the contacts of the benefit counselors kind of throughout the state, the specialists basically. And they're not somebody that you yourself are going to work with, but they're going to help point you in the right direction. I think I don't know if they're navigators, but whoever they are, it's for the whole state of Texas. Would that be something good for me to send out, or do you have something else that you want to include that we'll send out to everybody when we send a copy of the slides and a link to the recording?
Yeah, I was going to drop it in the chat, but somehow it's not letting me hit enter. But I do have, for each of the regions, I do have my position that you would want to connect with to make sure that you get connected with the right schools in those areas, because each of us maintain a directory, if you will, for all the schools within our region. maybe after my next couple of slides, I can try to drop it in again. And if not, Allison, I'd be glad to share that with you
I
as
would say
well.
just email us a PDF of it because we're emailing
Okay.
everybody anyway, and we'll just attach that in a PDF, and that way
Okay,
people
perfect.
don't have to try to copy and paste it from the webinar. Okay?
Okay,
Thank
awesome.
you.
And just to give everybody in the audience a sense for the type of counselors that we have, we do have various types of counselors that are considered subject matter experts. But we have transition counselors. So these counselors are assigned to various schools and spend most of their times at the campus. So they're only serving students with disabilities because those are the transition aid students that we want to connect with. Those are transition counselors. We call them TVRCs. We also have general counselors that we refer to as VRCs, and they assist the general population. And I know I'm here really mainly providing information about transition age students, but a VRC, for example, could serve you and I. If I needed services at some point in my life, because I have maybe sustained an injury or, I have acquired a disability and I need to get back to work, perhaps I've lost my job, I could come and apply for services as an adult and I would be directed to a general VRC, not a transition counselor, of course. Another area is our blind and visually impaired VRCs. So they're called BVI VRCs, and they work with students that have blindness or visual impairments. And again, we have counselors that serve we have BVI counselors that might serve students in the same school as a TVRC. But again, TVRCs would take all other students with disabilities, and our BVI VRC would get those students at the same campus that are only blind or visually impaired. And then the last one there is our regional rehabilitation counselor for the deaf. So they serve deafness and hard of hearing. So any student that has deafness or hard of hearing would be referred to these counselors that have these specialty caseloads. And again, you could have those three counselors, a TVRC, a BVI, and an RCD, all serving the same campus, but of course, they're only working within their specialty area. Next slide.
We have a
And this,
question in our chat
oh,
box.
sure.
Basically, as a part, hang on, basically what they're saying is that they have been reaching out to the VR counselor about VR services that are offered to be an independent driver, but we haven't heard back in spite of sending multiple emails. Who do we contact to get that? I want to comment on that first. There's this little rumor going around in the special needs community that VR will pay for disability driving training for an individual with a disability. And I just want to make it clear that they might. It depends if it's in line with with the plan. And so I think it's a nasty rumor that goes around that basically says that this program is going to pay for disability driving training for everybody, but that is not always true. And when you call and say, I want to get this disability driving training paid for, that's kind of like the red flag. Like, and you guys are getting calls on that all the time. So I think I just want to address this because I know it comes up all the time.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up as well. And it's a very important point. And I appreciate you, Allison, sharing that because again, when you apply for services, what we work towards is what we again call an individualized plan for employment. So what maybe Allison needs isn't what Rebecca needs, right? So I caution parents to say, well, Rebecca's friend Allison got a laptop and they got this and they got that. Please don't do that because that's probably what I needed, but that's not what Allison needed. Would she want it? Maybe so, but it has to be based on need. So for example, when it comes to a student in high school wanting to go to driver's education, it's not an automatic. It has to be tied into how we are going to provide that training to allow the student to actively engage in pre-employment services. So there has to be a direct connection. And if there's not, then we would not consider that as a service to be included on a plan, for example.
And so I just want to throw out that term IPE for you guys versus IEP, which you've been hearing for years in school, two different things, but it is the plan for employment, the IPE here, and a couple of other things. So I know that disability driving training is important, and I did it with our loved ones. There are things that you can do, just so you know. The local hospitals, like, in the greater Houston area, it's like Tier Memorial Herman, and I think there's something at Methodist as well. It's basically these rehab centers. It's the same place if a person had a stroke and they're going back to drive again to see if they have the faculties to drive. To me, that's the very first step before you go behind the wheel training or getting a permit or anything like that. That is the first step, and usually your health insurance is going to cover that. It's like a 56-point assessment. It's in the office. It's not behind the wheel of a car. They have like simulators, and as a parent, what that told me was, does my loved one have the faculties to be considered to have a driver's license to begin with? And once they pass that, that's where that next phase is of the disability driving training. And there are driving schools out there that are specifically nuanced and helping a person with disabilities, including cognitive deficits, working memory, whatever it is, right? They can help them. But as far as working is concerned, is do they need to have a driver's license to fulfill the plan, right? It's not just because you want them to. And VR is familiar that in the state of Texas, parents are responsible for driver's ed. They don't provide it in the schools anymore, right?
Yeah,
It's something that
right.
you do out on your own, and you pay for behind the wheel training, whether you have a neurotypical kid or a kid with a disability. So the answer is maybe. And
Maybe.
but I want you guys to know that there are services are out there. But that very first step is going to like a rehab program. If you call like a rehab, whether Ironman or whatever it is, and just say, I wanted to find out where we would get that driving assessment, like if a person had a stroke or a person with a disability, then they'll point you in the right direction. And that's the very first step. Okay. Insurance covers it. All right.
But
And
the other thing I
just
was
maybe
going,
just to also offer an expansion of that, you could have, again, it's all individualized. So we're going to consider that student circumstance. But we have in the past, for example, if a parent says, hey, we're interested in the paid work experience, and we can consider up to 12 weeks of paid work experience. But they say, I can't take in my work, but we do have a vehicle they could use. So if that was the case, we could prepare to support a driver's education in that situation to allow the student to then engage in one of the pre-employment services, which is the paid work experience, right? We also have students that have physical disabilities, and we do evaluate them to see if they can, like you just mentioned, Allison, if they're able to drive. And should they need a vehicle modification, maybe they have a vehicle, but they need it modified. Again, that could be another service that our agency supports. We would pay for the expense of that modified vehicle, but everything is going to be considered independent of any other case.
And one more thing before we go to you, Justin. Most little cities and towns across the state of Texas have disability transportation shuttles, like, like it's through like the public bus system or whatever, but they have a separate division for disability. And a lot of them are like one-way rides for $1 or something like that. They have special programs, special pricings as far as and drop-offs and things like that, so you can look into those as well. Justin, did you have something that you wanted to mention? Okay, we'll go ahead and go on for right now. Rebecca, we got just, oh, there you are, Justin. Go ahead and say what you wanted to mention.
oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Some background wise, but anyway, but yeah, the other thing I was going to mention is some of the school districts, they have a transition program, like after you, they have that Army IEP wise, what you, because, when you get to the latter part of high school years, that, big question is, what does your son or daughter want to do after their senior year of high school wise? So, and some schools just offer transition programs where they have like a job coach and all things. And of course, they can keep them till 22 the student wise, and they can help with that getting the workforce going kind of thing, like where it's resumes, find some part-time jobs, all this stuff like that, and forefront wise too, before they go into the workforce solutions kind of things wise. So it'd be much easier, get more of a deeper dive, see what their interest is wise too, as well to look into. So if
This
they
is good.
school
And Justin, I mentioned when we have a loved one with a disability, we have a whole lifetime, from the financial planning, perspective, we have a whole lifetime to pay for a loved one with a disability. And a lot of people with disabilities, they might not be there yet, like at 18 at graduation, from a maturity perspective or a developmental perspective. And it doesn't hurt to stay in the school for another, 3 or 4 years to build those skills and build that confidence, get some more training. We see really good outcomes with that. But in this, this webinar is really not about that, but we do encourage families to have those conversations early with the school in your ARD meetings, of letting them know what your intentions are to stay, if you're planning to stay in school post age 18. But we've seen a lot of success with these programs, Justin, and what you're talking about, where people, maybe they started with an internship, or they started volunteering and then it moved to an internship, and then the internship went well, and then the kid ended up getting hired full-time at a hospital with benefits and everything. And they're not even getting any SSI benefits or anything like that because they're doing so well because of programs like that. And that is a real thing. So that's a great point. Thank you, Justin.
Mhm.
Thank you, Justin.
Mhm.
And here's my last slide. This is what I mentioned just briefly earlier. The Start My VR, there's a little a QR code there that you could scan to self-refer. And again, it looks very similar to what I mentioned earlier, which is our initial contact. We're just asking for your name, your address, your phone number, email, your reported disability. And then once you complete that, it gets routed to the appropriate area of the state and then the appropriate office within your community. And then you will get contacted by one of our counselors that will call to follow up and kind of try to get an understanding of what you're calling about, what your needs are. But I will tell you, if you're already connected with a high school and your counselor, please don't use this QR code. Work directly through your transition counselor if you have that person on campus already. Or get connected with your school campus representatives, and they can tell you who the transition counselor is if there is one on campus. And
And
then
and then the community awareness specialist as well, they can point you in the right direction, or if you're having problems with communications. The thing is this organization is no different than anybody else post-COVID. It's hard to hire the right people, to keep the right people, and a lot of times there has been understaffing issues and other things like that. But be patient, don't give up. There is support, and sometimes you're not hearing back from someone. This has been my own experience because they don't work there anymore. And so just waiting perpetually for somebody to call you back. I would say get with the community awareness specialist. They can put you in contact with the supervisor for your area. And if you need to get reassigned to a new counselor, then you can. And again, sometimes you need to get reassigned to the new counselor. And I'm not like saying just go get reassigned. But sometimes you need to go get reassigned to a new counselor because maybe you're not gelling well with that particular counselor, and that's okay. All these counselors have huge caseloads. And so that is a real thing that's happening. So I just wanted to encourage you on that, not to give up. And we are going to put that contact list that I have, and you're going to send one as well, because there's definitely help out there for you.
and on that previous screen, the VR office locator is another good starting point for anybody. So that last link there at the bottom, or you can call, and anybody within our state office area can connect you with the right region, if you will.
And then that's another thing, like for other states, you can say, vocational rehab and then put your state in, vocational rehab, put your county in, and the resources for your state and county are going to pop up and how you can connect with them as well. Okay, so this is some more contact information that we have. And again, we're going to put the PDFs with it that we had mentioned as well. Justin, did you have something else that you wanted to share?
But just if you're interested, if I'm having a work in my workplace, they contact me or have any questions wise what the company does, feel free to email me or like I'm also, do advocacy work and public speaking. So any more questions, feel free to reach out.
Yes, thank you. And that's at Blue Sprig. So thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is, I always say state and federal funding is a combination of these programs. That because they're all over the United States, there is federal funding, but there's also state funding involved. And that's what I think is so exciting is some of these trainings and assessments. We've had families that had their basically most of the child's college education paid for by this program because it was in line with the IPE. I mean, we've seen some pretty awesome things, but again, it's not the phone call of, I heard you pay for college, I want to sign up for that. Or I heard you pay for disability driving training and I want to sign up for that. It's a different conversation. It's, we want the vocational rehab and we want to, kind of go through this process. So did you want to comment any more about the funding?
This is just our Stevens Active. Some people really want to know how the funding is used and what's spent, but we just put that on all of our presentations so that people know where our funding comes from and which programs it supports.
Awesome.
And those are just extra links. I'm not going to go over those, but they're extra links that you can share with the deck of the PowerPoint and people can learn a little bit more about vocational rehab.
Perfect. Everybody's going to get a copy of today's slides and a link to the recording so you can go back and check that out. In our slides, you'll have a link to any upcoming webinars. We have topics on everything you could possibly think of, SSI, Medicaid, working while getting SSI, special needs trust, guardianship. If you can think of it, we've got a topic for that. They all live on the Consolidated Planning Group YouTube channel. If you Google that, you'll see the little flower and you can subscribe to that for free. That channel was born out of my own frustration. I have loved ones with disabilities, and when we were transitioning into adulthood, I felt sufficiently annoyed on why is everything so difficult. So I'm kind of an over around it through kind of girl, figure it out. Let's slay this. And so the things that we've learned along the way, we've got webinars, we've partnered with other organizations and professionals that have helped us along the way that we know that can help your family. And the bottom line is with our YouTube channel, we want it to empower you, to give you the tools and resources that you need to feel successful and not feel defeated. There's so many times as parents, we feel a little defeated. Everything that we do is hard. It's like all these little roadblocks that we're running into all the time. But I think that the encouraging thing is there is help out there. There's a lot of cool stuff out there. We need to be students and keep our ear to the ground and listen and look into these programs. And I can't tell you how many success stories that we've heard of other families with this program, with VR in itself. And with, a kid that maybe when they were looking at him at 15, they thought this kid's never going to work. And now they're working full time and they're doing great. So just think about that. Guys, we always offer free personalized consultations. This QR code will take you to our calendar where you can schedule your free personalized consultation. We are glad you're here. We're glad that you've reached out. It's been wonderful to partner with both you, Rebecca, as well as Justin. Thanks for going over this information with us. Thanks everybody for being here with us today, and be on the lookout for the email, and we'll look forward to connecting with everybody again soon. Bye now.
Bye.